He was a star in the NBA.
He was one of the top basketball players.
And she was the girl of his dreams.
She was the spotlight of wherever she went. Her smile, her personality, her looks.
For this dynamic pair, the world was their oyster.
She loved Eddie and Eddie loved her.
Until a shocking tragedy tore their bond asunder.
You see nothing but poof blood.
Unleashing an investigation that would expose a salacious tale of professional misconduct and unspeakable violence.
Opening that door was like a nuclear bomb dropping.
This case involves brutal murder, NBA superstars, multiple love triangles, and gang retributions. Everywhere you turn, there's a new mystery.
January 24th, 2009. It's a blustery Saturday evening in the trendy Chicago neighborhood of South Loop. But the weather's the last thing on Yolande Henry's mind as she and her boyfriend, Reginald Corner, drive to the upscale townhouse her 24-year-old daughter, Nova, calls home. Earlier that day, Nova was mysteriously absent from her beloved grandmother's funeral, and repeated calls to her cell phone have gone unanswered.
We're almost at the house, and I'll call you back later to let you know what's going on, okay?
At this point, I've got like everybody trying to call her, and we're not getting any answers.
Still nothing?
No, nothing at all.
Sorry, just relax.
Filled with a growing sense of dread, Yolande and Reginald make their way to the front door.
Something just hit me that something was strange, and I could not pinpoint what it was.
As we was going up the stairs, that eerie feeling just was there.
What Reginald and Yolande discover next is every parent's worst nightmare.
I opened the door to find Nova laying on the floor in a pool of her own blood.
Wait, okay, don't touch anything. Don't touch.
It appears Nova has been shot multiple times in the back, chest, and head. But that's not the worst part. Lying beside her bullet-riddled body is her 10-month infant, Ava.
I just remember being frozen. After that part, things became a blur. I could hear myself screaming and just lying on the floor.
Nova and Ava had been both shot in the head.
She was shot to death. There was through and through gunshot wounds to both of her arms. Those bullets went through Ava's carotid artery as well.
Both the young mother and daughter are dead, but the nightmare is just beginning. Nova also has a 3-year-old son.
I didn't know whether he was left in the house.
But fear for Nathan's safety is quickly eased.
What they found, in addition to Nova and Ava's body, was her son, who was alive but sleeping.
Her son was found in the chair with a blanket in the same room with Nova and Ava.
He looked like he had been asleep. Lord knows. What he had to endure inside that house. And I heard so much just for him. In a flash, you know, they were gone, and he had to witness that.
Yolande's grandson is covered in his mother's blood, but otherwise appears unharmed. Yolande and Reginald call 911.
Chicago Emergency Repair. Yeah, can I get the police? You need an ambulance? Yeah, bring the ambulance, the police down.
Moments later, investigators and EMTs arrive on the scene. But not even the most jaded among them can fathom what unspeakable evil had touched this family, or the house of horrors they were about to expose.
I can't even describe it. It was just something like I was in a movie or something, I guess. I mean, it was like unreal.
Born in 1984, the oldest of 3 siblings, Nova Henry grew up in a loving home in southeast Chicago.
Nova was the firstborn. Nova was the first grandchild. Nova was my first niece. She was a lot of firsts.
Nova was the big sister, kind of mama to them, and they always looked up to her. She was small in stature, but big in personality.
Nova was actually my best friend. She had to have me as a tag-along all of her life.
A bright and bubbly teenager, Nova loved hanging out with friends, listening to music, and most of all, dancing.
She knew where she wanted to go in life. She had a beautiful heart. Anybody that came across her loved her.
I think what made us such good friends was our love for dancing. Our personalities just seemed to click.
Nova became a star on our high school pom-pom squad.
We went to the Apollo in New York twice. We all loved dancing to kind of stay out of trouble.
They call themselves divas. They are the divas, and everybody else got to call them divas too, because they were divas.
They were what you would call the popular girls of the school.
The crowd Nova ran with was always the in crowd. Nova has always been the it girl, the go-to girl. From middle school, elementary school, to high school, Nova was most popular. I didn't even have a name. My name was Nova's little brother.
Naturally, the vivacious teenager had plenty of suitors. But one guy stood head and shoulders above the rest.
Hey, where you going?
Nowhere.
Nowhere? Where's nowhere?
I don't know.
7 foot tall, Eddy Curry.
They had been friends first and foremost since junior high school. He respected her friendship and she respected his.
She thought that he had a great personality. He always made her laugh.
She didn't have to talk so much about it because I would hear her on the phone with him so much. It would kind of get annoying. They would call each other back every minute, every second, every hour. And we knew who she was talking to. We knew how she would be smiling, who she was talking to.
A gifted athlete, Eddy became a dominant force on their high school basketball team. Named a McDonald's High School All-American player, Eddy also earned the coveted title of Mr. Basketball in the state of Illinois.
Eddy was one of the top basketball players in high school.
He became really popular, and he took our team down, all the way down to state that year.
With Eddy towering over the competition on the hardwood and Nova on the courtside cheering him on, these two friends grew close. And over their senior year, their friendship blossomed into a full-fledged romance.
I could tell that Nova was falling for Eddy. This was someone that she found a liking to, and I hope that it would go down the path of happiness.
To see them together was kind of awkward because she was so small and he was big, but he made her happy. So, I was happy for her.
After graduation, the young couple's fortunes soared when Eddy decided to skip college and go pro. He was selected 4th overall in the 2001 NBA draft.
He was a young man who had come into kind of like a jackpot.
But after signing a lucrative multi-million-dollar contract with his hometown Bulls, Eddy was quickly sucked into the never-ending travel and day-to-day grind of professional basketball.
As an NBA superstar, it can be incredibly challenging to maintain a faithful relationship at home. You have women throwing themselves at you in every city, and the temptation of that occurs everywhere you go.
Not that Eddy let the time away from home or the temptations of the road stand in the way of his love for Nova.
Nova flew in and out of town frequently to visit him. She loved him a lot. Eddy loved her as well.
Of course, the beautiful and independent Nova had ambitions of her own. Enrolling in Illinois State University in 2003, Nova knew exactly what she wanted to do with her life.
She's always wanted to have a future career in dentistry and have her own office.
With both their careers taking off, these high school sweethearts seemed destined for greatness. Until one day, Nova was blindsided by some unexpected news.
Eddy Curry married?
What?
Eddy was actually seeing a young lady by the name of Corey, and unbeknownst to Nova, he actually married her.
Nova found out by reading the newspaper.
Who is Corey?
I don't know. You don't even know this girl?
No, Mama, no.
So it was very hurtful when Nova found out about that.
But just 6 months into the marriage, Eddy filed for divorce from his new wife. In Nova's eyes, this proved that Eddy was still in love with her.
She got over it fairly quick because the paper is saying that he's asking for a divorce. So she looked at it as though he's trying to right his wrong and correct it.
Nova's hunch was right on target. Once the divorce was final, Eddy put the full court press on Nova.
He had sent a driver to come get her. She went out of town with him. Nova started going out to dinner with the Bulls players.
Nova and Eddy's love connection seemed stronger than ever. So strong that when Eddy was traded to the New York Knicks in 2005, Nova put her dental school dreams on hold and began splitting time between Chicago and New York.
Unbeknownst to me at that time, she was leaving school to go and travel with Eddy. She was put on academic probation.
She was in college, she was being flown to basketball games. You know, that's a pretty exciting lifestyle to live at such a young age.
Later that year, Nova gave birth to a beautiful baby boy named Nathan.
When he was born, I saw a great change in Nova. From that day forward, she was just a mother.
2 years later, in 2008, Nova and Eddy had another child, daughter Ava.
She was just like the most beautiful chocolate baby. That's what I call it, my little chocolate mommy.
When I'm holding Ava, I was just thankful that she's here and that she have a great life, and she looks so precious.
With 2 beautiful children and an NBA star boyfriend, life had never looked better for Nova Henry. But Nova's happiness came to a horrifying end on January 24th, 2009.
Just could never imagine that somebody would hurt my child or my grandchild.
I can't express in words, actually. I've seen a lot of things, nothing like that.
But as cops swarm the scene, they're about to learn a shocking revelation. One that will not only expose a life of lies, but cast a seemingly fairy tale romance in a far more sinister light.
I couldn't believe it. It's somebody who you were attached to, that you communicated with.
When I found out, I just couldn't believe the person that did this. I'm just like, no. This can't be what's going on.
Nova Henry and NBA star Eddy Curry were beloved high school sweethearts. Together, they had 2 beautiful children and the world at their feet.
They were happy, and he respected Nova. He showed that he cared for her.
He was kind of a breath of fresh air. Nova was in love with him.
But their dream life together is severed on January 24th of 2009. After Nova unexpectedly missed her grandmother's funeral, her mother Yolande checks on her and makes a terrifying discovery.
I remember her lying on her back and just blood everywhere. And at that point, I think I just went into hysterics.
Nova's death is only part of the tragedy. Her 10-month-old daughter, Ava, has also been murdered.
She was lying at the foot of her mom, and they had been shot multiple times.
I just kind of dropped the phone and started, crying. I was just in complete shock.
Thankfully, Nova's 3-year-old son, Nathan, was unharmed in the attack.
There were blood smears on the walls. He had to have been, for lack of a better word, plain in the pool of blood left there by his mother and baby sister.
As the coroner's team removes the bodies to prep them for autopsy, detectives begin processing the scene. Even for the most seasoned officers, this double homicide is beyond the pale.
When you have a young mother and a 10-month-old baby who are both shot in the head, certainly victims as young as Ava was, it's terrible.
This crime was absolutely heinous. There was blood everywhere. It was a crime scene like no other. And to imagine who could have done this to this beautiful young woman and her child, it could have only been a monster.
Based on the position of the bodies and the numerous shell casings scattered throughout the home, detectives surmise the attack on Nova and her daughter originated from the back of the residence.
There was a trail of blood that led from the back room of Nova's home to the front door.
She ran for her life with her small infant in her arms. Those bullets went through Ava's head.
But what could have sparked this deadly rampage? Given that the attack originated from inside the house and that there are no signs of forced entry, detectives can rule out one possible motive.
No signs of a robbery or a burglary of any kind.
Is the gunman someone Nova knew and trusted? To Nova's friends and family, it's hard to believe anyone would want to intentionally harm her and Ava.
Nova was very outgoing, very compassionate. She had a million friends.
If you knew Nova, you loved her. There was in a way not to like her, unless you just were, hell-bent on not liking her, and that would have been your own fault.
Questioning Nova's friends and family, investigators discover Nova's relationship with Eddy was more complicated than they realized.
Nova and Eddy, I believe their ups and downs started shortly after she was going to leave college. I just knew that this wasn't the right situation for Nova.
Nova knew I didn't necessarily agree with her decision to keep seeing and dating Eddy. He had been so dishonest throughout the relationship.
According to Nova's friends, she had only recently gotten over the shock of Eddy's surprise first marriage. But no sooner had she forgiven Eddy than Nova got wind of another equally as shocking engagement.
She found out that he was getting married.
This time to a woman named Francine.
She was working for the Bulls organization or working at their practice center.
Nova would see her when Nova came to his games, but never thought that they had anything going on.
We did find out via the news that he had actually gone and gotten married. He hadn't told Nova anything about it. And she basically was devastated.
For Nova, the insult was amplified by the fact that at the time, she herself was 5 months pregnant with her and Eddy's son, Nathan.
Nova was again blindsided, completely caught off guard. She was hurt.
She was very upset. I mean, I just imagine you're pregnant and you hear your child's father's getting married. You wouldn't even think he was in a relationship.
According to friends, shortly after Nathan was born, Eddy's financial support for Nova and baby Nathan began to wane.
The financial support was not coming in anymore.
At that point, Nova hired a local attorney named Frederick Goings to negotiate a formal child support arrangement.
So the feedback that I got from different people was, he's a good attorney, he's a hungry attorney, so I figured we could use him.
When I first met Frederick, I thought that he was intelligent, well-educated. I thought that he had his stuff together.
Hiring Frederick Goings paid off. A Chicago court granted Nova $6,000 a month in child support. But surprisingly, once the case settled, Nova and Eddy rekindled their romance.
She showed me a tattoo that she had got with Eddy's name on it. And that's when I knew they were back fooling around. She was dealing with a married man. She knew it was wrong, but, she loved him.
But shortly after baby Ava was born, Eddy did another about-face and began to dispute Nova's claim that he was Ava's father. Nova and her attorney, Frederick Goings, had no choice but to haul Eddy back to court.
She wasn't setting out to purposely ruin Eddy's life or his wife's life.
There was a DNA test done to determine the paternity of Ava, and it was revealed that Eddy Curry was the biological father.
The judge had finally made orders that, Eddy was going to pay her for each child after paternity had been established for both children.
Based on his lucrative NBA contract and the fact that he was proven to be the father of both of Nova's children, Eddy was ordered to pay her $15,000 a month in child support. To investigators, this hefty payment raised the question, could Eddy be a person of interest in Nova's murder?
$15,000 is a substantial sum even for an NBA superstar. And to have to pay that every month certainly gives Eddy a reason to be upset.
For friends, family, and especially investigators, there's just one thing to do. Find Eddy Curry, and find him fast.
To me, the hunt was on.
Nova Henry and NBA star Eddy Curry engaged in a passionate, nearly decade-long romance that produced 2 beautiful children. But when Eddy marries not once, but twice behind Nova's back, she seeks and is awarded $15,000 a month in child support.
She thought that he would willingly pay for his expenses because he knew that this was his baby. She was more so focused about him supporting the kids versus what Eddy and his wife are doing with themselves.
But just 4 months after winning her battle for child support, Nova and her infant daughter Ava are found gunned down inside Nova's upscale Chicago townhouse.
A whole nother life of hell is what it felt like to me.
After learning of the child support situation, detectives are curious if there's a connection between Eddy and this tragedy. Just hours into the investigation, they interview the NBA star.
Mr. Curry. Yes, sir. Sir, Texas Metropolitan Police Department.
Despite investigators' suspicions, Eddy seems genuinely distraught by the death of his daughter and former girlfriend.
Yeah, come on.
But that doesn't stop investigators from peppering Eddy with questions about his possible involvement in the crime.
You may have been behind or wasn't paying your child support. Do you know anything about that, or can you tell us anything?
I have no idea, man.
While Eddy admits their relationship had its ups and downs, the fact of the matter is he never stopped caring for Nova.
She loved Eddy and Eddy loved her.
Still, detectives want to know Eddy's exact whereabouts at the time of the shooting.
Where were you on the night of January 24th?
Turns out, Eddy has a rock-solid alibi, one that can be verified by 18,000 New York Knicks fans.
He was playing at Madison Square Garden the night of the murder. He was traveling to Philadelphia that next day to play a game against the 76ers. There was no evidence whatsoever to connect him to this double murder.
There was no doubt that Eddy cared for Nova. It's clear that Eddy would never hurt neither Nova or his children.
But there is someone close to Eddy who might harbor ill will towards Nova. Eddy's wife, Francine. Those close to the couple say Francine knew all about Nova and Eddy's relationship and was none too pleased about it.
She sent me an email and saying that she had heard that, Nova had his child and that she wanted to speak to her. She was upset.
Could Eddy's on-again, off-again relationship with Nova have troubled Francine? And if so, could she have hired someone to off her romantic rival?
Here we have a woman that has been in and out of Eddy's life for years. That absolutely gives her a motive.
But to investigators, it appears Francine is as distraught over the news of Nova's death as Eddy. And in their eyes, she seems to harbor little bitterness over Eddy and Nova's alleged romance.
She probably thought that he was being unfaithful just because of his fame and his money. And, that's what guys in that field are known for.
As for any direct confrontations with Nova, it seems she never met Eddy's ex face-to-face and only spoke to her on the phone.
They had the one phone conversation and that was pretty much it.
There was nothing that gave any evidence whatsoever that she was connected to this crime.
For investigators, it seems like another dead end. But a day into the investigation, they uncover another possible, albeit indirect, link between Eddy Curry and the crime.
In 2007, there were a series of crimes committed in Chicago at the hands of the traveling vice lords.
Notorious for their brutality and ruthlessness, the traveling vice lords have terrorized the streets of the Windy City since the 1970s, and they aren't afraid to target professional athletes in the Chicagoland area.
They targeted first Antoine Walker in 2007. They tied him up with duct tape and managed to steal more than $200,000 worth of jewelry and money and cars from his home.
2 weeks after the attack on Antoine Walker, members of the traveling vice lords set their sights on Eddy Curry.
Eddy Curry was also allegedly burglarized by the traveling vice lords. Both he and his wife were duct taped and was robbed at gunpoint in his home in Chicago.
2 members of the traveling vice lords were eventually arrested for the attack on Eddy Curry. Given the gang's propensity for violence, investigators wonder if Nova's death could somehow be connected.
It's very possible that members of the traveling vice lords could have sent a message to Eddy and to his family not to testify against him.
It's a chilling theory, one that now has everyone in Eddy and Nova's extended families living in fear.
I was just scared for the fact that somebody was going to try to come back and get my grandchild.
Nova Henry always believed she and high school sweetheart turned NBA star Eddy Curry were soulmates. And after having 2 beautiful children together, Nova wanted nothing more than to settle down with Eddy and raise their family.
I knew that they loved each other and they would always somehow find their ways back to each other.
There was just one problem. Eddy was married. And after Chicago police find Nova and her infant daughter, Ava, brutally murdered on January 24th, 2009, they turn to Eddy for answers. But it quickly becomes clear that Eddy and his wife, Francine, are 100% innocent of any wrongdoing.
There was no evidence whatsoever to connect him to this double murder.
But investigators have learned that a year and a half prior to Nova's death, a vicious Chicago street gang, the Traveling Vice Lords, targeted Eddy and his wife in an armed robbery.
Eddy Curry was a victim in that home invasion. That case was looked at.
2 men were arrested in connection with the burglary that occurred at Eddy's home. This could have been a hit specifically designed by the Traveling Vice Lords to keep Eddy from testifying in trial against them.
Detectives know the Traveling Vice Lords have the muscle and the reputation for carrying out such a threat. But when investigators put out feelers through their gang unit, the word on the street is these 2 cases aren't connected.
There was absolutely no evidence linking that case and those offenders in that case to this double murder. None whatsoever.
If the Traveling Vice Lords aren't behind this terrible crime, then who is? Looking for answers, detectives circle back to the crime scene and discover a startling new piece of evidence.
Neighbors heard gunshots from Nova's townhouse approximately 1:20, 1:25 p.m. Interestingly, before the gunshots were heard by these neighbors, they heard arguing between an adult man and an adult female.
Nova's neighbors can't ID the man's voice, but they say this wasn't the first time they heard arguing inside the home. Questioning friends and family again, detectives learn another new piece of information.
Yes, I was calling with some follow-up questions regarding Nova Henry.
Even though Nova still carried a torch for her high school sweetheart, Eddy, once the child support issue was resolved, she'd resolved to start seeing other people.
He was not going to be faithful, and she started to date other people.
Looking into Nova's past boyfriends, investigators have come across another familiar name, attorney Frederick Goings, who represented Nova in her child support case.
Frederick, to me, was like the equivalent of an ambulance chaser, except for he would chase women who would be involved in high-profile child support cases.
While there's no denying Frederick Goings got results in the courtroom, some of Nova's friends say he had begun lobbying to be more than just Nova's attorney.
He just tried to bombard her right off the bat with gifts and such.
I remember meeting Fred as her new attorney, representing her for legal matters. I didn't think nothing about them dating. Then I started seeing him more often.
Detectives' interests are piqued. If Nova and Frederick Goings were dating, it's an ethical violation of the oath Mr. Goings took as a member of the Illinois Bar.
They became in an intimate relationship, and that's when he was supposed to fall back off her case, but he never did.
You don't date your client. That's just one thing you don't do.
I kind of just brushed it off until she told me about a second date, and I thought that was really weird. It was pretty unethical that he would be dating somebody that he's representing in a child support case.
Detectives decide to broaden the scope of their investigation, and in doing so, determined that Frederick and Nova often slept over at each other's houses, and that the more time they spent together, the more Frederick tried to keep Nova and her family apart.
What would you do without me? What would you do without me?
I don't need you, Frederick.
We learned from family and friends that the relationship was horribly volatile. He had attempted to isolate her from her family and friends right from the get-go.
Your kid's father don't want you. Who else is gonna want you?
Look, don't start. I'm not in the mood, okay?
He would talk about her way she looked just to get her self-esteem down so he can get in her head and make her think that nobody else wanted her but him.
He would denigrate her every way imaginable, from her lack of education to how her body looked postpartum.
Nova was moving in and out quite a bit. Once you're arguing to the point to where you just want to pack up everything and leave, you know, I knew that arguments had to be pretty bad between them.
One night, with Nova's friend Pamela Owens looking on, the abuse turned physical.
Where you think you're going?
Out? Where you going?
Frederick came to Nova's residence. He came in and, you know, they got into an argument over me being there.
What? Excuse me?
Get up the steps, I said.
And he pushed her down the stairs.
When he put his hands on Nova, you were able to see it. That time it was visual bruises.
It's rare that physical abuse happens just once. People should know that it most likely will happen again, and it will continue to get worse over time.
Searching court records, detectives discover Nova moved to file an order of protection against Frederick Goings, but never followed through on the paperwork.
There was an order of protection that was filed by Nova against Goings that she eventually let lapse a couple of weeks later.
If a claim isn't formalized, it makes it very difficult for police to follow through and to be able to find them.
This, unfortunately, is very common in the cycle of domestic violence. He pursued her. He apologized repeatedly and profoundly, and she forgave him.
But even though she never went through with the order of protection, Nova made it clear to Frederick the relationship was over.
She knew that this was going to be her jump start to finally being happy and free from Frederick and to give her kids a new start.
She felt like she was getting her groove back, her life back, that she was finally leaving the dreadful being around him.
Given the gruesome nature of Nova's murder and the hidden history of violence between her and Frederick, investigators are beginning to believe this hothead attorney might be the one who pulled the trigger. Chicago detectives have eliminated a host of suspects in the grisly shooting death of Nova Henry and her daughter, Ava. Among those ruled out is her former lover, NBA star Eddy Curry. Investigators now have a new suspect in their sights, Nova's former attorney, Frederick Goings.
It clearly was a volatile, tumultuous relationship, several threats, physical abuse throughout the period of time that they were together.
In an effort to locate Frederick, police obtain a warrant allowing them to trace his cell phone. And within 48 hours of the murder, they determine that Frederick is in a motel in Michigan City, Indiana, some 57 miles away from Chicago.
They saw the defendant's vehicle parked in a parking lot of a Comfort Inn in Michigan City, Indiana, and maintained their surveillance of that.
Detectives decide it's time to confront Frederick Goings.
Chicago Police Department.
Yeah, I know who you are.
We just wanted to ask you a few questions about your girlfriend, Nova Henry.
Frederick Goings doesn't ask a single thing about Nova or what any of this is about. I believe he asked, am I under arrest? And he was told no.
Mr. Goings refused to answer any questions, and the conversation was terminated, and that was it.
I figured that Frederick being an attorney, he probably took the right measures to cover his tracks.
Despite their suspicions, detectives and Nova's family must be patient.
I didn't leave my house for at least a month.
I was worrying about him coming around. Just imagine every second just being terrified, like the boogeyman is gonna come and get you.
With no physical evidence linking Frederick to the crime, investigators aren't ready to arrest him. Instead, they execute a search warrant for his vehicle.
Investigators were looking for more concrete information. They were looking for anything that they could find that would connect him to the crime. They needed something to go on.
It doesn't take long for the search of Frederick's car to hit pay dirt.
A live round was found on the passenger seat of the defendant's vehicle. They found that live round matched the rounds at the crime scene.
Shortly after that, the coroner's office releases the results of Nova Henry's autopsy, which offers further evidence placing Frederick Goings at the crime scene.
Forensic examination revealed Goings had left his DNA inside of her and obviously had sex with her.
Investigators are taken aback.
The DNA inside Nova clearly was consistent with him coming by late that night and staying the night.
But why would Nova let a man like Frederick back into her life after all that he'd recently put her through?
I think for someone who is in a victim role in an abusive relationship, they just want to go back to that time when they trusted each other and, you know, they saw the good things in each other.
Whatever Nova's reasons for letting Frederick back into her life, the DNA evidence clearly places Frederick Goings at Nova Henry's residence shortly before she was murdered. As does surveillance footage investigators subpoena from the townhouse complex.
The day of the murder, they saw Frederick Goings' Range Rover pulling into her parking lot, and that vehicle remained there until 1:29 p.m. that afternoon.
That's not all. A search of Nova's home computer also places Frederick Goings inside her residence just prior to the murders.
Based on the forensic examination of the victim's computer, Frederick Goings clearly was sitting at her computer accessing his email accounts and bank accounts.
Between the shell casings, the DNA, the surveillance video, and the email records, investigators have more than enough evidence to throw the book at Frederick Goings.
Circumstantial forensic electronic evidence in this case cannot lie. It cannot be mistaken, and it is incredibly damning when you tie it all together. It is absolutely clear that the defendant, and only the defendant, could have committed this crime.
On February 20th, 2009, an arrest warrant was issued for Frederick Goings for the murder of Nova Henry and her daughter, Ava.
I had no doubt in my mind that Frederick was the person that did this to Nova and Ava.
But during his initial pretrial hearing, Frederick Goings remains adamant he had nothing to do with either murder.
He turns around to us and says, I loved Nova and Ava. I didn't do this to Nova and Ava.
After 4 long years, the trial finally gets underway. During their opening arguments, prosecutors assert that on January 24th, 2009, Frederick Goings drove to Nova Henry's townhouse and begged her to let him in.
What do you want, Frederick? I can't talk to you. Come on. Can I come in?
I don't know.
Once inside, Frederick sweet-talked Nova into sleeping with him one last time. After they made love, Frederick began accosting Nova, though not about their relationship.
Nova.
What, Frederick?
What is this?
It wasn't in any jealous rage. It was fueled by greed.
$24,000 to be exact. Unbeknownst to Frederick, Nova had filed a petition contesting his attorney's fees in her earlier child support case.
Frederick Goings was sitting at her computer. He was looking at things, and at one point he opened the email that had a legal filing that Nova Henry's new attorney was going to contest his attorney fees.
That's when he literally went ballistic
No, get off of me!
and used his handgun to shoot 24-year-old Nova Henry and her 10-month-old baby girl.
No!
To bolster their version of events, prosecutors point to the autopsy report, the surveillance footage, the evidence seized from Nova's computer, and the shell casings recovered inside Frederick's SUV.
The Chicago PD did a great job of building a case towards him.
When it was their turn, Frederick's attorneys point out the lack of a murder weapon, as well as the fact that not a single eyewitness could place him at the scene.
The defense tried to do was to isolate each piece of evidence and place it in an individual vacuum instead of looking at it all together, which, say, look over here, look at there, poke holes, reasonable doubt. That's what they're supposed to do. And they certainly tried to come up with alternate theories.
Nova's family worries the tactic could plant the seed of reasonable doubt in jurors' minds.
I was nervous as hell. I had to excuse myself because I felt myself going into an asthma attack.
We were just so nervous, and anxiety was going through everyone.
You never know for sure what a jury's going to do in any type of case.
But there's one last witness who's yet to take the stand. A witness whose testimony will leave little doubt about what really happened the day of the crime.
I asked him, I said, who hurt Mommy and Ava?
February 4th, 2013, Chicago, Illinois. Attorney Frederick Goings is on trial for the shooting deaths of his former client turned lover, Nova Henry, and her infant daughter, Ava, the child of a previous relationship with NBA basketball star Eddy Curry. Prosecutors have argued that Frederick had Nova trapped in a vicious cycle of verbal and physical abuse. And when he realized Nova intended to contest the legal fee she owed him, he snapped.
When Frederick Goings discovered that objection to his petition for legal fees, he committed both the murder of Nova and Ava.
Frederick goes into his email and he discovers that Nova has a plan to take away some substantial money from him. And he goes into a blind, just rage and shoots Nova and her daughter.
Clearly there was an intent to kill. He fired over and over again while she ran for her life.
Frederick's defense attorneys have countered by pointing out the absence of a murder weapon or eyewitnesses.
Defense attorneys like to point holes and say, well, you don't have a live witness.
But as prosecutors are quick to point out, there is one survivor who witnessed the attack. Nova's 3-year-old son, Nathan Curry.
Nova's son actually witnessed this heinous crime. And it's unimaginable what he would have witnessed, what he saw. It's a delicate balance in getting to the truth of what happened and what's in the best interest of the child.
In a bold move, prosecutors lobbied to the judge to make an exception to the hearsay rule and allow Nova's mother, Yolande, to testify about a conversation she had with her frightened grandson shortly after she discovered the bodies of her daughter and granddaughter.
Courts are very strict about hearsay evidence. In this case, however, the court made a decision that he was really just too young and decided that Nova's mother was the best person to relate that story.
With the judge setting aside the hearsay rule, Nova's mother, Yolande, testifies about the chilling conversation she had with her grandson after she discovered the bodies.
I was sitting with him. My first thing was I unwrapped him from the cover, just to check him to make sure that he wasn't wounded. He just started talking. And so I went along with it and I asked him, I said, who hurt Mommy and Ava?
Can you tell Grandma who did that to Mama and Ava? Can you tell me?
Frederick.
Her son being left in this home with his mother and baby sister dead on the floor in his living room and having to be with them for over 4.5 hours. I hope to God he never remembers any of that particular day as he grows up.
Yolande's heartbreaking testimony erases any lingering doubts. And on February 12, 2013, the jury convicts Frederick Goings of 2 counts of first-degree murder. 51 days later, the judge sentences him to life in prison.
When they said life, I was satisfied because I knew that that would be like death to him. Because his freedom and his arrogance of being able to do whatever he wanted is something that he cherished.
He got 2 life sentences with no chance of parole. I'm looking to see what his reaction was. He showed no emotion whatsoever. We were expecting, when they were giving a verdict, some type of reaction out of him, and he didn't blink an eye.
I just remember a huge weight being lifted. It was finally kind of some closure and a relief.
This was about money and the fact that he was so fueled by his greed that what ultimately drove him over the edge to shoot this woman. To me, that takes him into an entirely different category.
But even with Frederick Goings behind bars, there's nothing that can bring back Nova Henry or the precious young daughter she had with her high school sweetheart turned basketball superstar.
Eddy and Nova's relationship was flawed. And even though there were those tumultuous times in their relationship, Eddy loved Nova and his sweet 2 young children. This murder just ruined a beautiful young family, destroyed a mother and her young child, leaving another child without a mother.
I told Frederick, my life is forever scarred. I can't move forward. I'm stuck in this hatred. I'm stuck in sadness. I'm stuck in just despair because I'm so busy being mad at you. But the way for me to get over that is I have to forgive you so that I can go on.
There's a big hole, emptiness in the family. It's sadness, but you try to think of the positive side of it, that my beliefs are in heaven, rejoicing and praising and dancing and in a better place than here on earth. My sister has now become an advocate of domestic violence, which I never saw her doing, but she does it and she does it well. So the family's very proud of her.
I would go around speaking to people about domestic violence, abuse, about being aware of the signs. If it could just help save one person or make one person aware so that they could help another person, that was what I was determined to devote the rest of my life to.